I'm Sara, Hussein, chair of the International Independent Fact-Finding Mission on the Islamic Republic of Iran. My fellow experts, Viviana Krstichevich and Max Duplessis, are joining us remotely. As you're all aware, the fact-finding mission was established by the Human Rights Council almost 3 years ago, immediately after the nationwide protests erupted in Iran in September 2022, following the arbitrary arrest and unlawful death of Jina Mahsa Amini in custody for improper hijab. In April 2025, the Council broadened our mandate to investigate, quote, recent and ongoing serious human rights violations in Iran, unquote, and to continue to collect and preserve evidence for future accountability purposes. This renewed mandate has allowed us to widen the scope of our investigations while continuing to examine the structural causes of human rights violations, including discrimination on gender, ethnic, religious, and political grounds. Our mandate complements, but is distinct from that of the Special Rapporteur on Iran. We conduct at the fact-finding mission investigations into specific incidents and patterns, and we collect and preserve evidence that can support initiatives for accountability and for reparations. To date, we have interviewed over more than 300 victims and witnesses, including inside the country, and we have collected and preserved over 38,000 items of evidence. We have achieved this despite being denied access to the country till now, and notwithstanding the way in which fear of reprisals has inhibited victims and witnesses from speaking out. Madam Chairperson, since March of this year, we have documented further deterioration of the human rights situation in Iran. Airstrikes by Israel on Iranian territory and a subsequent domestic crackdown by the Iranian authorities have further constricted civic space, undermined due process, and eroded respect for the right to life. Between 13th and 25th of June this year, Israel launched hundreds of airstrikes against Iranian military and nuclear facilities, some of which also impacted civilian objects, including medical facilities and schools. According to the government of Iran, approximately 1,100 individuals were killed, including women and children, and over 5,600 people were injured. Iran responded by launching drone and missile strikes against Israel. According to the government of Israel, 31 people were killed and over 3,300 injured. Amongst the attacks, Israel launched targeted airstrikes on Evin prison during visitation hours and without advance warning. The government of Iran stated that around 80 individuals were killed, including prison staff, prisoners, their families, women, and at least one child. Israeli officials claimed responsibility for the airstrikes, asserting that they targeted Iran's, quote, repressive institutions, unquote, and stating, though without providing any supporting evidence, that counter-espionage operations were taking place inside the prison. Our preliminary investigation indicates that the Israeli airstrikes hit civilian buildings in the prison complex, which do not constitute legitimate military objectives, and that the strikes in these buildings were likely intentional. Our investigation also indicates that Iranian authorities themselves may have failed to take reasonable measures to protect detainees before, during, and after the strikes. They evacuated prisoners only after the strikes, removing some of them at gunpoint and shackling and threatening them. Prisoners' families were not informed for weeks, sometimes months, of their loved ones' whereabouts. By mid-August, the government of Iran had reported that over 21,000 quote, suspects, unquote, had been arrested during the hostilities. According to credible information which we have received, they included lawyers, human rights defenders, journalists, and even social media users who simply published content relating to the hostilities. Our investigation also indicates that the government of Iran has been continuously deactivating journalist SIM cards. Repression of ethnic and religious minorities under the guise of ensuring national security has also intensified. Over 330 Kurds and large numbers of Arabs have been arrested, while hundreds of thousands of Afghans were deported. Members of the Baha'i minority were accused of being, quote, Zionist spies, unquote. Some were arrested in house raids with their property confiscated. The surge of executions in Iran this year is particularly concerning. Credible information indicates that over 1,200 individuals have been executed so far this year, exceeding the 2024 total, which was already the highest recorded figure in Iran for over a decade, since 2015. We urge the government of Iran to commute the death sentences of all people on death row and to immediately free those who have been sentenced to death arbitrarily. This includes women human rights defenders, such as Baksha Nazizi, Varishe Muradi, and Zaira Shahbaz Tabari, who were sentenced to death in relation to their activism. We welcome the government of Iran's recent decision to commute a death sentence and its decisions to overturn others for review. However, there are strong indications that the government of Iran continues to systematically implement the death penalty in ways that contravene international human rights law. Every such execution, in violation of international human rights law, violates the right to life. If executions form part of a widespread and systematic attack against a civilian population as a matter of government policy, then those responsible, including the judges who impose capital punishment, could be held accountable for crimes against humanity. The repression that we have documented is not confined to Iran's borders. We have received information indicating that over 45 journalists face credible threats in 7 countries for reporting on events in Iran. Such intimidation and surveillance violates the right to freedom of expression and may threaten the rights to life and security of the person. Madam Chairperson, the current upsurge of repression is not an isolated event. Rather, it reflects a recurring pattern where the government of Iran responds to protests and dissent with intense repression marked by human rights violation. According to our investigations so far, we have seen patterns that we have identified earlier during the investigation of the 2022 Women Life Freedom protests. It seems that state authorities have continued to commit gross human rights violations with impunity, intersecting with discrimination on grounds of gender, religion, and ethnicity. And such repressive measures and policies continue to deprive women and girls in particular of their fundamental rights. In conclusion, allow me to set out our request to member states. First, we call upon you to press for an immediate moratorium on executions in Iran as a first step towards complete abolition of the death penalty. Second, support all forms of accountability for violations of human rights inside Iran and reparations for survivors. Third, assist persons who have faced or are at risk of human rights violations by Iran, including journalists, lawyers, and human rights defenders, and consider all diplomatic and judicial measures, including humanitarian visas and prosecution where possible under universal jurisdiction. Lastly, we call on you to safeguard and resource this mandate. Sustained support is essential to our investigations, to evidence preservation, and protection of those courageous women and men who continue to speak out and demand equality and justice. Thank you.
I thank the chair of the Independent Fact-Finding Mission on the Islamic Republic of Iran. I next invite the special